What happens when Barack Obama, calm as ever, is asked about Donald Trump's obsession with him on live TV? One single line from Obama had the audience on their feet, the host doubled over, and the internet on fire. You could almost feel the pause in the room before it happened. A late-night audience, buzzing with curiosity, leaned forward in their seats as the host leaned in with a grin, waiting for Barack Obama's response. The question on the table: Donald Trump's latest swipe at the election and the state of American politics. Everyone knew Obama was sharp on his feet, but no one expected what came next. When he finally opened his mouth, a single line came out, short, cutting, and hilarious, and within seconds, the studio burst into uncontrollable laughter. The host's face turned red, the cameramen struggled to keep steady shots, and millions watching at home would later replay the clip on loop, sharing it across every corner of social media. That was the moment Barack Obama didn't just answer a question, he stole the night. But to really understand why that one line hit so hard, you need to picture the scene before the explosion. The studio wasn't a stiff political setting. It was warm, laid back, and set in Los Angeles on a Thursday night. The crowd was lively, clapping through the commercial breaks, waiting for the promised surprise that the host had teased earlier. When Obama walked out from backstage, the applause wasn't polite. It was the kind that shakes the walls. People were standing, some cheering like they were at a concert, phones raised high trying to capture the former president cracking one of his trademark smiles. He didn't rush. He took his time, waved, shook hands with the host, and sat down in that slow, deliberate way that reminded everyone he was comfortable under the lights. The host, Jason McCready, a comedian from Boston known for mixing humor with politics, wasted no time. He leaned across his desk with a mischievous smirk and said, "So, I don't know if you've heard, but Donald Trump had some pretty colorful words about you this week." The audience laughed immediately. It was the kind of laugh that said, "We can't wait to see where this goes." Obama chuckled quietly, his eyes narrowing slightly like he was setting up a chess move. Jason kept pushing. "He said you were, and I quote, the worst thing to happen to American television since black and white reruns. Now, Mr. President, I think he owes an apology to I Love Lucy, but what do you make of that?" The line was ridiculous, but it framed the moment perfectly. The laughter rippled through the room, but everyone wanted to hear what Obama would say. Obama leaned back, calm as ever, adjusting his jacket like he had all the time in the world. He didn't fire back right away. He let the silence work for him, letting the anticipation stretch until the audience grew quiet, waiting. You could hear someone cough in the back row. Then Obama tilted his head, smiled faintly, and spoke in that slow rhythm people recognized from his speeches. "Well," he said, "I suppose if I'm the worst thing to happen to television, then Donald must be the best thing to happen to late-night comedy. Folks gotta thank him. He's been giving you material for free." It was simple. It was direct. And it detonated the room. The crowd broke. People were clutching their stomachs, slapping their hands against their seats. Jason dropped his pen and doubled over, his laughter cutting through his microphone. Obama didn't move. He just raised his eyebrows, as if to say, "What, did I lie?" That one-liner was so sharp, so unexpected, that it instantly became the headline. Viewers at home tweeted it within seconds, and even before the commercial break ended, clips of the moment were trending. But the power of that moment wasn't just in the joke. It was in the delivery. Obama knew how to make people wait, how to give them just enough silence to build tension, then break it in a way that felt effortless. That's why it worked. It wasn't cruel or mean-spirited. It was funny in a way that turned the entire room against Trump without even raising Obama's voice. And in today's climate, where every word gets dissected, the fact that a single quip could make such a splash was remarkable. For the audience in Los Angeles, it wasn't just another late-night taping. They were part of something that felt bigger than television. They were eyewitnesses to the kind of moment people text their friends about the second they walk out of the studio. By the time the cameras cut to a commercial, people were still laughing, clapping, shaking their heads in disbelief. But the real shock came later, when people realized just how fast that moment would ripple through the country, spreading from television to phones to dinner tables in a matter of hours. If you've ever been to a live taping, you know there's a certain electricity in the air. But that night, inside the studio in Los Angeles, it felt different, like something unpredictable was about to happen. The seats were packed, the stage lights gleamed, and even before Obama walked in, people were whispering, passing guesses back and forth about what he might say if Trump's name came up. Some were fans of late-night comedy, some were longtime Obama supporters, and a few had just come for the free tickets. But together, they formed an audience that felt like a character in itself, ready to laugh, gasp, and roar on cue. The set itself was striking but comfortable. A mahogany desk for Jason McCready, 2 chairs angled slightly toward each other so conversations felt close and personal, and the backdrop of the Los Angeles skyline glowing with fake studio stars. The cameras glided silently from side to side, red lights blinking each time a new shot was live. From the moment Obama stepped out, the room transformed. Even people who weren't politically inclined stood to their feet, clapping and cheering, as though a famous rock star had just entered. Jason couldn't resist breaking the tension. As the applause stretched on, he leaned into his mic and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, you do realize he's not running for prom king, right?" The joke landed perfectly. Obama laughed along, holding up his hands as if to calm the crowd. It wasn't forced. It was that natural charm he carried, the kind that filled arenas back when he campaigned. Once the noise died down, Jason leaned forward. "All right, Mr. President, let's get right into it. You've been quiet for a while. Some people say too quiet. Meanwhile, your old rival, Donald Trump, he's been saying a whole lot. Any thoughts?" That line was bait, and everyone knew it. You could hear a few chuckles from the front row, like they knew they were about to witness a highlight. Obama didn't rush. He folded his hands, gave Jason a sidelong glance, and replied softly, "Jason, if I responded to every one of Donald's comments, I'd need a permanent desk on this show." The audience erupted again. It wasn't just the words. It was the way Obama delivered them. Calm, patient, almost fatherly, but with a twist of humor sharp enough to draw blood. Jason nearly fell out of his chair, covering his face with his cue cards. "See, this is what I mean," Jason shouted over the applause. "You give me one line, and I could cancel my writing staff for a week." The crowd laughed louder, but Obama just sat back, smiling as if he had said nothing extraordinary. That was his weapon, understatement. He never looked like he was trying to destroy anyone, which made it all the more devastating when he did. Then came a moment that made the room lean in even closer. Jason shuffled through his cards, pretending to pick a safe question, then stopped. "Okay, but seriously," he said. "Trump's been talking a lot about the 2024 race. He keeps bringing your name up, blaming you for everything from the economy to, I don't know, the price of eggs. Do you feel like he's still running against you?" The way Jason framed it put Obama in a corner. Either he dodged or he faced it head on. The silence stretched, and people were practically holding their breath. Obama tilted his head and gave a sly smile. "Jason, Donald has been running against me since 2008. The problem is, he hasn't won once. That did it." The roar that followed felt like it might blow the roof off. People clapped so hard it echoed. Jason slapped his desk, pointing at Obama as if to say, "There it is, the knockout." Even the band in the corner was laughing, some of them holding their instruments mid-note. But in the middle of the chaos, there was something fascinating about how Obama stayed collected. He wasn't showboating, wasn't leaning into the applause. He just sat back, adjusted his tie, and waited for the laughter to die down. He'd played this game before. He knew timing wasn't just about the punchline. It was about letting the crowd breathe, then pulling them back in. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged glances. You could tell they knew the clip they were capturing would be replayed endlessly. Even the security staff at the edges of the room cracked smiles, some shaking their heads like, "Yep, that's Obama for you." Jason, trying to regain control of his own show, finally lifted his hands. Okay, I have to ask this. When you prepare for moments like this, do you write these lines down ahead of time, or do they just pop into your head?" Obama chuckled, leaning toward the microphone. "Jason, if you think I sit at home practicing comebacks for Donald Trump, you've got the wrong guy." He paused, eyes glinting. "That's his job." The laughter was so loud this time, the band actually started playing over it, trying to keep the rhythm of the show moving. The host threw his head back, his laughter almost drowned out by the cheering. But while the audience thought they'd already heard the best moment of the night, the real highlight, the line that would dominate headlines, was still waiting just around the corner. Jason McCready knew he had something special brewing. He'd worked with presidents, senators, and celebrities before, But there was a rhythm to his conversation with Obama that was different. Each exchange felt sharp, effortless, like a tennis match where one player was holding back a little just to keep it entertaining. The audience could sense it too. They weren't just watching, they were leaning forward, hungry for the next swing. Jason shuffled his cards again, partly for effect and partly to buy himself a moment. He glanced at the camera, raised his eyebrows, and turned back to Obama. "All right," he said, lowering his voice slightly. "Let's stop dancing around it. Donald Trump has been making headlines every other day. He's called the last election rigged. He's called you everything from a fraud to, quote, Hollywood's favorite actor pretending to be a politician. And last week at a rally in Phoenix, he went as far as to say, if Barack Obama had run against me in 2020, it wouldn't have even been close. What do you make of that?" The room instantly shifted. The laughter cut off like someone had hit a switch. People still smiled, waiting, but now they were quiet. They wanted to hear the answer. This wasn't small talk anymore. This was the heart of the matter. Obama didn't respond right away. He tapped his finger against the arm of his chair, leaned back slightly, and exhaled as though weighing how much he wanted to give. "Jason," he said slowly, "I've learned something about Donald. He says a lot of things that sound tough until you look at the facts, and the facts usually tell a different story." The audience clapped, though softly this time, almost out of respect for the tone. Jason leaned forward, not letting up. "So, if you had gone head-to-head with him in 2020, what do you think would have happened?" Obama raised his eyebrows. "Well," he said, pausing for just a beat, "the first thing is, I didn't need to. Joe Biden handled that just fine. But if Donald's asking, I'll answer. Elections aren't won with slogans and insults. They're won with plans, with policy, and with trust. And between the two of us, I think Americans know who they trusted." The crowd burst into cheers, loud and sustained, and Jason slapped the desk like a gavel. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said dramatically, "case closed." But Obama wasn't done. He leaned in closer, almost conspiratorial, and added, "Now I'll admit, if it had been me up there, Donald would have had one advantage." He stopped, letting the suspense hang in the air. Jason squinted, caught off guard. "What's that?" he asked. Obama grinned. "He wouldn't have had enough material for 2 campaigns. He's been running against me since 2008, and after all these years, he's still losing." The eruption was immediate and deafening. People shot out of their seats. Jason laughed so hard, he slapped the desk twice more and then stood up, pacing the stage like a coach after a game-winning play. "Oh my God," he shouted. "That's brutal." The camera panned across the audience, people wiping tears from their eyes, couples clutching each other's arms, some pointing at the stage like they'd just seen a historic knockout. Even the cameramen, usually stone-faced, were grinning behind their lenses. Jason returned to his chair, still shaking his head. "You realize," he said between laughs, "that clip just got me 1 million views before the show even ends?" Obama chuckled and shrugged. "Happy to help your ratings, Jason." But the host wasn't satisfied. He leaned forward again, looking at Obama like a man searching for treasure. "Let me ask you something. Does it bother you? The constant jabs, the obsession, the way Trump keeps pulling your name into everything?" This time, Obama grew serious. He clasped his hands, looked straight at Jason, and then at the audience. "Look, politics is noisy. People say a lot of things to get attention. But here's the truth. Leaders should be focused on people's lives, not their own grudges. If all you've got after years in office is complaints about somebody else, then maybe you're in the wrong business." The applause wasn't raucous this time. It was heavy, deliberate, the kind that carries weight. People nodded, some standing to clap, not because it was funny, but because it was true. Jason nodded too, his grin fading into something more thoughtful. That's actually a great point. So what do you say to people who feel like the country's just stuck in this endless back and forth between you and him?" Obama looked directly into the camera, his voice calm but firm. "I'd say this. Stop waiting for Donald or me to fix your problems. Focus on the leaders who are working right now at every level, local, state, national, because that's where real change happens. Personal rivalries make headlines, but they don't build roads, they don't lower healthcare costs, they don't make schools better, and at the end of the day, people want results, not a grudge match." The audience erupted again, this time with a standing ovation. Jason held up his hands, trying to calm them down, but it was clear the room had been shaken in a different way. It wasn't just about laughs anymore. It was about truth. But as powerful as that moment was, nobody expected what Obama was about to deliver next. The one-liner that would turn into a viral thunderbolt across the nation. The moment had ripened. You could almost sense it, the air thick with anticipation, the audience perched at the edge of their seats, Jason McCready grinning like a man who'd stumbled onto television gold. Obama had already scored points with his calm but cutting remarks, but you could tell something sharper was still sitting on his tongue. It was the kind of silence before a comedian drops the line that no one sees coming. Jason leaned across the desk. Okay, Mr. President, I have to ask. You've handled this like a gentleman, but people at home are begging me to push you harder. They want to hear what you really think about Donald Trump and all this constant noise he makes. So, if he were sitting in that chair right now, what would you say to him? The audience gasped and laughed at the same time. It was the kind of daring question everyone wanted asked, but didn't think Jason would have the nerve to say out loud. Obama leaned back, crossed his legs, and gave that familiar half smile, the one that usually came before he delivered a blow disguised as humor. Well, he said slowly, if Donald were sitting here, I'd probably tell him to relax. I mean, he's still talking about me more than 8 years after I left office. At some point, you gotta wonder who he's really running against, me, Joe, or his own reflection. The studio exploded. Jason doubled over, pounding his desk with both fists. Audience members stood up, some spinning around to laugh with strangers. The band started riffing spontaneously, like they were scoring the punchline. Obama didn't laugh at his own joke. He just shrugged, palms up, as though he'd simply pointed out something obvious. That contrast, the seriousness of his delivery against the hilarity of his words, made the line land like a hammer. Jason, wiping tears from his eyes, tried to recover. Oh my God, wow. I don't even think Saturday Night Live could have written that. Obama chuckled softly. That's the thing about Donald. He's his own material. You don't have to write it. He delivers it for you. The audience roared again, but this time the laughter carried an edge of catharsis. It wasn't just funny, it was a release. People in that studio had lived through years of bitter political fights, endless headlines, and exhausting debates. Hearing Obama cut through all of it with one clean slice felt like someone had finally said what they were all thinking. Jason, never one to miss a chance to stretch a bit, leaned forward again. Okay, but what if Trump hears this clip and you know he will and he fires back? What then? Obama tilted his head, his expression playful but confident. Then I'll know he was watching. And honestly, if I can keep him focused on me for a night, maybe the rest of America gets a little peace and quiet. That line landed like a second knockout. The laughter swelled so loud the floor seemed to vibrate. Jason pushed himself away from the desk, standing up and pacing, hands on his head. This is insane. You're roasting him harder than my writers ever could. Obama raised his eyebrows. I'm not roasting him, Jason. I'm just telling the truth. It's not my fault the truth sounds like a joke. The crowd howled. The cameramen zoomed in on Obama's face, that calm composure against the storm of laughter around him, capturing the exact image that would be screenshotted and shared across social feeds before the night was even over. Jason finally sat back down, trying to collect himself. You know, Mr. President, I don't even think you realize how funny you are. Like, do you ever think about doing stand-up after politics? Obama chuckled. I'll leave that to the professionals. Besides, if I started telling jokes full-time, Donald would probably try to run against me in comedy clubs. That was it. The audience cracked open like a dam. People stomped their feet, clapped until their hands turned red, shouted from the back rows. The band launched into an upbeat riff just to keep the energy from exploding into chaos. Jason leaned back, threw his cards into the air and shouted, "Good night, everybody, we've peaked!" Of course, the show wasn't over, but the energy in that studio had shifted completely. What began as a typical late-night interview had transformed into something raw, unpredictable, and unforgettable. Obama wasn't just answering questions. He was orchestrating the room, controlling the timing, pacing, and punchlines like a seasoned performer. He knew exactly when to pause, when to smirk, and when to drop the line that would echo far beyond those studio walls. For those watching live, it felt surreal. This wasn't scripted television. This was lightning captured in real time. Even the people who didn't usually laugh at politics were doubled over, wiping tears from their eyes. But the biggest laugh of the night, the line that would go down as the knockout heard across the country, hadn't even been delivered yet. It was still coming, and when it did, it would shake more than just that studio. It would dominate the national conversation. The night had already been electric, but what happened next would elevate it from memorable to unforgettable. The cameras zoomed in tighter, the studio lights seemed brighter, and every single person in the audience leaned forward, waiting. Even Jason McCready, who thrived on improvisation, could feel that Obama was circling something big, something that would break through the chatter of late-night banter and stamp itself into the headlines. Jason, sensing the moment, steadied himself. He leaned across his desk, lowering his voice as though trying to extract the deepest secret from a friend. "Okay," he said, "we've danced around this long enough. Let's get real. You've talked about Trump's obsession with you, you've joked about his comebacks, but if you had to sum it up, his whole fixation, the way he keeps your name in his speeches, his interviews, even in his tweets back in the day, what would you say to him? What's the one thing you'd want him to hear?" The room fell silent. You could hear the faint shuffle of someone adjusting their seat, the creak of a camera crane pivoting into position. Obama leaned back, eyes narrowed slightly, and then leaned forward again, clasping his hands. His pause was deliberate. He wanted the weight of the question to settle before he answered. Finally, with perfect calm, he said, "Well, Jason, if Donald's still talking about me this much after all these years, maybe I wasn't the president he wanted to replace. Maybe I was the father figure he never had." The eruption was immediate and volcanic. The audience screamed. People stood, some bent over clutching their knees, others waving their hands in disbelief. Jason launched himself out of his chair, stumbling backward with his mouth hanging open, hands pressed against his head like he couldn't believe what he had just heard. The band tried to cover the noise with a spontaneous riff, but it was no use. The room had detonated into chaos. Obama didn't crack a smile. He sat still, composed, almost statuesque, letting the laughter swallow the room. That was the brilliance. He didn't need to laugh at his own line because the delivery was so sharp it carved through the air like glass. Jason finally found his voice. "Oh my God! Did you hear that? Did everyone hear that?" He pointed at Obama, pacing the stage like a man trying to process a miracle. You just destroyed him, completely destroyed him." The cameras cut to the audience. A group of college kids in the front row were jumping up and down, slapping each other's shoulders. An older couple near the back leaned against each other, tears of laughter streaming down their cheeks. Even the producers off stage were caught wiping their eyes, some nearly doubled over. Obama raised one eyebrow, almost playfully, and added, "Look, I'm just saying, if you keep talking about a guy every week, at some point, people are going to start wondering if you need him more than he needs you." Another wave of laughter tore through the room, louder and more sustained than the last. Jason collapsed back into his chair, slapping the desk with his hand as if to ground himself. This is history. I don't even know what to say. That's going on my wall. Forget YouTube, forget TikTok. I'm printing it out, framing it, and hanging it right here on this desk." The viral line was already more than just a moment. It was an event. People in the audience were fumbling with their phones, trying to capture the aftershocks, whispering to each other about how no one was going to believe them when they said they'd been in the room. And then came the part that cemented it. Jason leaned forward, still gasping from laughter, and said, "You do realize, Mr. President, that whatever Donald says next, no matter what it is, will never top that. He could rent a blimp, he could write sky messages, but that line, that's the headline." Obama finally smiled, just slightly. "Well, Jason, I've always believed that when people show you who they are, you should listen. Donald shows us every day. All I did was put it into words." The crowd cheered again, a mix of laughter and applause, like waves crashing against a cliff. It was more than humor. It was catharsis. People weren't just entertained. They were relieved, energized, almost liberated by how directly and cleverly Obama had punctured years of noise with one scalpel-like phrase. What made it powerful wasn't just the jab at Trump. It was that it felt authentic. It didn't sound rehearsed. It didn't sound mean. It sounded like something only Obama could say, with his trademark blend of wit, composure, and calm precision. That's why the clip would spread like wildfire. That's why the country would still be talking about it the next morning. But as wild as the studio reaction was, the real storm was waiting outside those walls. Because once the clip hit the internet, it stopped being just a late-night joke and became a cultural flashpoint. The roar in the studio had lasted so long that Jason McCready had to wave his arms like a conductor just to quiet the crowd down. It was rare for a late-night show to feel like an arena concert, but that's exactly what it had turned into. Some audience members were standing on their chairs, still clapping. A few were leaning over the railings to yell down toward the stage. You could see camera operators laughing behind their rigs, their shoulders shaking as they tried to keep the red light steady. Jason leaned forward, still shaking his head, his cue cards scattered across the desk. "Mr. President, I've been doing this show for 12 years. 12. And I don't think I've ever seen a studio react like this." Obama gave that slow, knowing smile. "Well, Jason, sometimes the truth just needs the right punchline." The band leader, a saxophonist named Curtis Green, couldn't resist chiming in from the corner. He shouted into his mic, "That wasn't a punchline, that was a knockout." The audience cheered again, clapping in rhythm as if they were egging Curtis on to keep the commentary coming. Jason pointed toward him. "Exactly. Even my band is stunned, and trust me, they've seen a lot." He turned back to Obama. "How does it feel? You know that line, what you just said, is already leaving this room. It's going to explode online, probably before we even wrap this taping." Obama shrugged lightly, leaning back in his chair. "You know, Jason, when you've been in politics as long as I have, you don't think about moments like this. You think about how people at home are feeling. If they laughed tonight, if they felt a little lighter for 5 minutes, then I did my job." The sincerity in his tone shifted the energy for a beat. The audience, still buzzing from the joke, fell into a quieter applause. It was like they realized they were part of something that had both humor and weight. But Jason wasn't ready to let the tension drop completely. He leaned in, eyes wide. "I gotta be honest with you, though. I've interviewed a lot of people who've taken shots at Donald Trump. Some do it clumsily, some just sound angry. But the way you do it, it doesn't even sound like an attack. It sounds like a conversation. And somehow, that makes it hit even harder." Obama chuckled. "Jason, you ever heard the phrase, 'kill them with kindness'? Sometimes kindness and humor together can cut deeper than anger ever could." The audience erupted again, this time with applause that rolled like thunder. People weren't just laughing now. They were nodding, clapping, almost cheering. It was more than entertainment. It felt like affirmation. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged frantic hand signals. One mouth to another. "We've got it. This is the clip." In the control room upstairs, monitors replayed the viral line over and over, sound engineers struggling to balance the audio because the crowd's laughter had spiked the levels. One of them muttered, "This is going to break the internet." Even backstage, the ripple was palpable. A handful of crew members leaned against the wall near the dressing rooms, one shaking his head and saying, "Man, Trump's going to lose his mind when he sees this." Another added, "This'll be on CNN before breakfast." Jason, realizing how rare it was to capture such a moment, tried to reel Obama back into the conversation. "Okay, so let's play this out. You know Donald's going to respond. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. What do you think he'll say when he sees this?" Obama tilted his head, his grin returning. "Probably the same thing he always says, that the media is unfair, that everybody's against him. Maybe he'll post something at 3 in the morning. But the truth is, Jason, when you're more focused on me than the people you're supposed to serve, you've already lost the argument." The crowd clapped hard again, their applause carrying an almost serious tone. It wasn't just humor anymore. It was truth, packaged in a way people could digest. Jason looked out at the sea of faces, then back at Obama. "You realize," Jason said softly, "you just gave my entire audience exactly what they came here for. Laughter, truth, and a story they'll tell for the rest of their lives." Obama smirked, leaned back and said, "Well, Jason, that's the least I could do. Besides, your ratings needed the help." The audience howled once more, Jason throwing his head back in laughter. "He's killing me. He's absolutely killing me." The show's floor manager waved frantically from the wings, signaling they had only 30 seconds before they had to cut to commercial. Jason, flushed and grinning, turned back to the cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, stay right where you are, because when we come back, we'll try to recover from this absolute obliteration." The band struck up a funky riff, the lights dimmed slightly, and the cameras pulled back for the transition. Audience members whispered to each other as the applause faded, many pulling out their phones to text friends. They knew they'd just witnessed something destined to live far beyond that night. But what no one in that studio could have predicted was just how quickly the clip would spread once the world outside those walls got their hands on it. When the commercial break ended and the cameras faded out for good, the studio still buzzed with laughter and disbelief. Audience members walked out into the Los Angeles night like they had just been part of a championship game. But the moment they pulled out their phones, the real spectacle began. Clips of Obama's one-liner were already circulating before the show officially wrapped. A student from UCLA in the second row had recorded the entire exchange on her phone, posting it on TikTok with the caption, "Obama just ended Trump in 10 seconds flat." Within 20 minutes, the clip had racked up hundreds of thousands of views, each comment funnier than the last. "Trump's therapist just quit," one wrote. Another chimed in, "He's not running for president anymore. He's running from Obama." On Twitter, still called that by millions despite the rebrand, political commentators scrambled to grab the clip. One journalist from the Los Angeles Times tweeted, "Obama just reminded everyone why timing is everything in politics." Another added, "Sharp, calm, devastating, classic Obama." Memes popped up instantly. Split-screen photos of Trump pouting next to Obama with the caption, "Talk to me when you're over it." Cable networks weren't far behind. CNN cut into their late-night programming to replay the moment, the anchor struggling to keep a straight face as she described it. "We're getting reports that the crowd reaction lasted nearly a full minute. Folks, we don't usually cover late-night comedy this way, but this was different." MSNBC ran the clip on a loop, breaking down Obama's delivery like it was game tape. Fox News, meanwhile, scrambled for a response, running a chyron that read, "Obama's cheap shot on Trump sparks outrage." But even their own panel couldn't stop smirking as they tried to downplay it. By the time morning hit on the East Coast, the video had climbed to the top of YouTube's trending page. One clip titled, "Obama Destroys Trump with Savage Line on Live TV," had 3 million views before breakfast. Podcasts that usually recorded once a week scrambled to get emergency episodes out, dissecting the cultural earthquake. A comedian in Austin tweeted, "Obama just took every stand-up comics closer and dropped it at 11:15 p.m. on a Thursday." The speed was dizzying. Reddit threads swelled with comments dissecting every word, some users replaying the silence before the punchline as if it were a masterclass. He paused for 6 seconds. 6. "That's why it hit like a freight train," one commenter wrote. Another replied, "Trump has Truth Social, Obama has timing, guess which one works?" Even late-night rivals picked it up. The next evening, Jimmy Kimmel opened his monologue with, "So I was going to tell a Trump joke tonight, but Obama already did it better." Stephen Colbert followed with, "Obama doesn't even need a Netflix special. He just needs one chair, one camera, and one Trump rally clip." The audience howled as Colbert replayed the viral moment for his crowd, who laughed just as hard as the original audience in Los Angeles. For Trump supporters, though, it was chaos. On Facebook, conservative groups were furious, calling the line disrespectful and beneath a former president. One meme circulated with Trump photoshopped as a boxer, bruised and battered, under the headline, "Fake Knockout." On Truth Social, Trump himself weighed in at 3:17 a.m., posting in all caps, "Obama was never funny, low ratings show, totally fake audience, sad." The post, of course, was screenshot instantly and mocked across Twitter. One reply read, "Obama lives rent-free and Trump pays the rent on time." Meanwhile, average Americans were texting the clip to their friends, playing it at office break rooms, replaying it on the subway. A man in Dallas filmed his grandmother's reaction as she watched the clip on her iPad. She nearly fell out of her chair laughing. In Portland, a high school teacher said his students quoted the line so much, he had to tell them to write essays about why humor can cut deeper than anger. What gave the clip staying power wasn't just that it was funny, it was that it felt authentic. Obama wasn't on stage with rehearsed lines or a teleprompter. He was sitting in a chair, calm as ever, and with one phrase, he turned years of political noise into a joke that people could share in their group chats. It wasn't mean-spirited, it was witty, disarming, and clean. That's why it spread so fast, because people wanted to laugh at something that felt true, and the numbers told the story. Within 48 hours, the clip had racked up over 50 million views across platforms. Hashtags like Obama mic drop and hashtag father figure trended for days. Even celebrities chimed in. Chrissy Teigen tweeted, "Obama just gave me my new ringtone," while Mark Ruffalo joked, "The Hulk couldn't smash harder than that line." But as unstoppable as the internet storm seemed, everyone wanted to know the same thing. How would Trump himself respond when the cameras were on and the crowd was his? By the weekend, the anticipation had reached a boiling point. Everyone knew Donald Trump wasn't going to let Obama's viral moment slide without a response. For years, he had built his image around the idea that he never backed down from a fight, no matter how small or how absurd. So when word spread that he was scheduled to speak at a rally in Des Moines, Iowa, the press descended on the city in droves. They weren't there to cover policy. They were waiting for the comeback. The rally grounds buzzed with energy, thousands of supporters waving flags, wearing red caps, and chanting in unison. News cameras lined the barricades, reporters clutching their microphones as if bracing for impact. The atmosphere felt more like a sporting event than a political gathering, everybody waiting to see how Trump would answer the blow Obama had landed. Backstage, however, the mood wasn't quite as confident. Advisors huddled in tense conversations, some urging restraint, others pushing Trump to go harder than ever. According to one staffer later interviewed anonymously, Trump was fuming the moment he saw the clip. He had watched it multiple times on a loop, each replay stoking his anger. He thinks Obama embarrassed him in front of the whole world, the aide said, and Trump hates nothing more than the idea of being laughed at. When Trump finally appeared on stage, the crowd erupted. He basked in it, clapping along with the chants, pointing out signs in the audience, and taking his time at the podium. But when the noise settled, he wasted no time bringing up Obama. "I watched this so-called joke Obama made the other night," Trump said, his voice sharp and animated. "The fake news is playing it like it's the greatest thing ever said in television history. Folks, it wasn't funny. It wasn't even close. Totally scripted. Totally staged." The crowd booed loudly, some shouting insults about Obama. Trump leaned into their energy. They had the audience stacked with Hollywood liberals, with all the cameras ready, and they think they can make me the punchline? Let me tell you something. I've been the punchline my whole life, and guess what? I'm still standing. I beat Hillary, I beat the fake media, and if Obama ever had the guts to run against me, I would have beaten him too. The crowd roared, waving flags high in the air. Trump smiled, encouraged, but his tone hardened again as he continued. "This is what they do, folks. They mock, they insult, they try to humiliate. But they're really mocking you. They're mocking the people who built this country, the people who love this country. Obama wasn't laughing at me. He was laughing at all of you." The line hit home with his bass. Chants of USA, USA filled the arena. Trump held up his hand, soaking in the noise. But behind the bluster, his irritation was still visible. His gestures were sharper, his pacing more restless than usual. Even his closest supporters could tell the joke had gotten under his skin in a way few things ever had. Later that night, commentators pounced on the contrast. On CNN, a panelist remarked, "Obama used humor to diffuse and disarm. Trump used anger to rally and defend. One approach went viral for its wit, the other for its fury. It's a tale of two styles." MSNBC's hosts laughed openly at Trump's denial of the line's impact, replaying his totally scripted claim against behind-the-scenes footage that showed Obama clearly improvising. Even Fox News, while defending Trump, couldn't resist showing the original joke again, inadvertently giving it more airtime. On social media, Trump's response was met with a mixture of mockery and defense. His supporters praised him for standing up to Obama, insisting the former president had crossed a line. But critics noted how defensive he sounded, arguing that his inability to laugh it off only made Obama's jokes sting more. One viral tweet summed it up. "When Obama laughs, America laughs. When Trump shouts, America scrolls." Even some Republicans quietly admitted it was a tough moment. A former GOP strategist told a reporter off the record, "Trump can handle attacks from politicians, but he's never figured out how to handle jokes. That's why Obama gets under his skin so easily. Because humor is something you can't fight with volume." Back at Mar-a-Lago, aides reportedly tried to shift Trump's focus to upcoming campaign stops, but he kept circling back to the clip. He wanted ways to counter it, even floating the idea of producing his own comedy-style video. The plan was quickly dismissed, but it showed just how rattled he was. Meanwhile, the original clip of Obama's line continued to spread, reaching audiences who rarely followed politics. Talk show hosts, Instagram comedians, and even TikTok creators who normally made dance videos were all reenacting it, keeping it alive in the cultural bloodstream. No matter how many times Trump tried to redirect attention, the joke followed him. But the story didn't end with Trump's rally. It was only the beginning. The bigger question became, how was the rest of America reacting to this clash of humor and anger, and what did it reveal about the country itself? By Monday morning, the Obama moment wasn't just a clip on YouTube, it was a conversation happening everywhere, in every corner of America. From small diners in Ohio to barbershops in Arizona, people were quoting the line, arguing about it, or replaying it on their phones for anyone who hadn't seen it yet. At a coffee shop in Portland, Maine, two retirees sat by the window sipping on steaming mugs. One of them, a Navy veteran named Harold Green, chuckled as he scrolled through his tablet. Listen to this. He called Trump the father figure he never had. He set the tablet down and laughed so hard his glasses slid down his nose. His friend Marjorie shook her head, smiling. You know what makes it so good? He didn't even sound mean. Nah, just calm, like he was telling the truth, plain and simple. Across the country in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a different scene unfolded. Inside a crowded barbecue joint, a group of Trump supporters gathered around a TV showing Fox News. A middle-aged man in a red cap grumbled, "That wasn't funny. He thinks he's clever, but all he's doing is mocking us." Another chimed in, "The media loves him because he takes shots at Trump. But that joke wasn't about Trump. It was about all of us." Heads around the table nodded in agreement, but even then, a few cracked reluctant smiles. Humor has a way of sneaking past even the strongest defenses. In classrooms, the clip became part of pop culture overnight. At a high school in Sacramento, students laughed as they replayed the moment on their phones between classes. "Bro, he roasted him," one student shouted, while another added, "My dad couldn't stop laughing last night. He played it 5 times. Teachers, overhearing, had to decide whether to let it go or turn it into a lesson about rhetoric, humor, and political communication. One government teacher later admitted she ditched her planned lesson and instead asked her students, "Why do you think humor can cut deeper than anger?" The discussion lit up the classroom. Workplaces weren't immune either. In an office building in Indianapolis, employees crowded around the break room microwave while someone replayed the video on their phone. The laughter was contagious, even among people who normally avoided political debates at work. One woman whispered, "I usually don't care about politics, but that was hilarious." Another added, "That's the first time I've laughed about anything political in years." The line was so widespread that even pastors and community leaders brought it up in subtle ways. In a Sunday sermon at a church in Dallas, the pastor joked, "Sometimes the best response isn't anger, it's wisdom wrapped in humor," like one former president reminded us this week. The congregation chuckled knowingly. It wasn't political, it was cultural. But while many laughed, others expressed unease about the deeper meaning. On NPR, a caller from Michigan voiced her concern. "Sure, it was funny, but what does it say about our country when the biggest political moment of the week is a joke? Shouldn't we be talking about issues that matter?" The host responded, "That's the power of humor. It captures attention. But yes, the question is, where do we go after the laughter?" Meanwhile, podcasts lit up with debates. One popular political show in Austin split their panel evenly. Half applauded Obama for cutting through the noise, half argued he'd fueled polarization. One panelist said, "Humor works because it feels true, but that truth can sting, and for some, it feels like humiliation." Another replied, "Or maybe it just exposed the insecurity that's been there all along." Even abroad, the line was picked up by international outlets. British newspapers ran headlines like, "Obama silences Trump with killer wit." In Canada, late-night hosts replayed the moment, while in Germany, one commentator remarked, "It shows how humor in American politics is more powerful than speeches." By Tuesday, the country was split into 2 camps, those who laughed, replayed, and celebrated the line as a refreshing moment of honesty, and those who saw it as an insult aimed at their identity. And yet, both sides agreed on one thing. It was unforgettable. People weren't neutral. They either loved it or hated it, which is what made it resonate so strongly. A professor of communication at the University of Wisconsin was interviewed on PBS and put it this way: "Humor is dangerous because it bypasses logic. You don't argue with a joke. You either laugh or you don't. And when it lands, it can reshape the narrative in a way no policy speech ever could." That's why the clip didn't just live online. It echoed in living rooms, workplaces, classrooms, and even houses of worship. It became shorthand in everyday conversations. People who normally tuned politics out found themselves laughing along, quoting Obama, and in some cases, reconsidering how they viewed the entire political rivalry. But as the laughter spread across the country, one question lingered. Beyond the joke, what did this moment actually reveal about leadership, communication, and the way Americans respond to conflict? For all the noise that followed, millions of views, endless memes, angry rants, and roaring laughter, the heart of the moment came down to something much simpler. A joke, yes, but beneath that joke was a lesson about leadership, timing, and the way people respond when two very different personalities collide in public. Obama didn't raise his voice, he didn't insult with venom, and he didn't try to win with volume. Instead, he used wit, calm, sharp, and disarming. And that struck a chord with people across the country in a way that political speeches rarely do. It showed once again that humor has a power that outrage simply cannot match. You can argue with a speech, you can dissect a policy, but you can't argue with a punchline that makes the entire room laugh at once. For that moment, in that studio, Obama controlled the narrative without forcing it. He made people laugh, and in that laughter, they recognized a deeper truth. Anger might stir up crowds, but humor connects people on a level they can all understand. Think about it. Americans from wildly different backgrounds were reacting the same way. A grandmother in Dallas laughed in her living room. A college student in California sent the clip to her friends. Office workers in Indiana replayed it on their lunch break. Even those who hated the joke couldn't escape it. They saw it on their feeds, heard it on the radio, or watched it on TV. It was everywhere. That universality is rare in modern politics, where people are often locked into their corners. But there's another lesson buried here, one that cuts deeper than the comedy. It's about resilience. Trump responded with anger, trying to frame himself as the victim, as someone mocked and ridiculed by elites. Obama, on the other hand, showed that you don't have to swing wildly to land a blow. Sometimes you let patience, timing, and a little humor do the work for you. And that's a lesson anyone, not just politicians, can take into their own lives. How many times do we face conflict and think the only option is to shout louder, to match force with force? But here was a demonstration that calmness, even playfulness, can sometimes dismantle hostility more effectively than anger ever could. That's why the moment resonated. It wasn't just about politics. It was about life. It also reminded people of something they'd forgotten. Politics doesn't always have to be exhausting. It doesn't always have to be dark or bitter. Sometimes it can be human. Sometimes it can even be funny. For just a few seconds, laughter replaced division, and that's no small thing in a country often split down the middle. Of course, the clip didn't erase the nation's political divides. Trump supporters still felt insulted. Critics of Obama still rolled their eyes. But what it did do was highlight how much people crave authenticity. The reason the joke landed wasn't because it was rehearsed. It was because it felt real. It sounded like something he thought of in the moment, and people believed it. In today's media world, where so much feels fake or scripted, authenticity is magnetic. That's the real legacy of that night. Not just a viral clip, not just a headline or a meme, but a reminder that humor, authentic, thoughtful humor, still matters. It can cut through the noise, disarm the anger, and leave people with something to remember. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. Whether you're sitting across from a political rival, arguing with a coworker, or dealing with family tensions, sometimes the sharpest weapon isn't shouting, it's humor. Sometimes laughter is the bridge that words can't build. So yes, the world will remember that line as the night Obama destroyed Trump with humor. But maybe the real destruction wasn't aimed at Trump at all. Maybe it was aimed at the bitterness, the heaviness, the constant fighting that drags people down. For one night, at least, humor cut through and people felt lighter. And that's why people are still replaying it, still quoting it, still smiling when they think about it. because it reminded them that even in the chaos of politics, there's room for humanity, there's room for wit, there's room for something other than anger. If you take anything away from this story, let it be this: don't underestimate the power of humor. Don't underestimate the calm voice in a loud room. And don't forget that sometimes the most powerful line is the one that makes people laugh and think at the same time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more moments that peel back the curtain on politics, humor, and the lessons hidden in both, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, there are plenty more stories worth telling, and you won't want to miss them.